So I finished reading Malcolm Gladwell's "Talking to Strangers," a wonderful book. And in this wonderful monogram, Mr. Gladwell tackles the problem, the conundrum of talking to strangers and understanding people from different backgrounds. And we often resort to an assumption of transparency, in which we believe that someone's inner state is accessible if we observe carefully his or her facial expressions, demeanors, and actions, verbal exchanges. This assumption of transparency is something that can lead us to fundamentally wrong corridors. That's what Mr. Gladwell describes in this book. Really impressive example is Mr. Chamberlain, as a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, meeting with Adolf Hitler, and Chamberlain completely misunderstands Hitler's intentions to invade, other nations, and you know, talking to talking face to face, you sometimes get a feeling, a personal impression of the other person, but that can be fundamentally misleading. You know, we tend to say that by looking eye to eye, face to face, we can understand a person better. But that is not simply correct. When interpreting facial expressions, which is actually very culturally dependent, some people might tacitly assume that strangers would use the same facial expression codes, and through that assumption, maybe we can see into the inner state of that person, irrespective of from which cultural background that the person comes from, and that is simply not correct. And that actually led to some really serious tragedies involving police force, justice system, and you know court judges being involved in the you know judgment of whether to release a suspect from jail or not. You know this really difficult task, which actually is conducted rather nicely about by artificial intelligence systems. Actually, AI systems are much better in judging the potential, you know, criminality of the suspect, because based on the objective data, of course, judging people on objective data has led to some statistical bias, based on race and gender and age and so on. So artificial intelligence systems do have their own problem. But having said that, Mr. Gladwell's point about how fragile actually our system perception of other people, especially when they come from different background, is really really interesting. And his argument about our failure, total failure in assuming transparency of other people is really really convincing. Really interesting point about this book is this argument, discussion on coupling. This idea that a certain behavior of people are coupled to a certain context and certain place and certain time, so that we can really say that this particular type of behavior comes from this particular personal traits or state of mind. Because that is saying that human behavior, human mindset are independent from the particular situation that these behaviors are coupled. Actually, it is very strongly coupled with circumstances and context that you encounter in society, so that we should not really forget the particular situation that couples with a particular behavior when judging or trying to make assessments about other people's internal states. So talking to strangers is, another tour de force from this really excellent writer. And as a brain scientist, cognitive scientist, I can testify that Mr. Gladwell does his research really well. Fact checking is superb, and it is a really superb popularization of what are really important trends in cognitive science and in the effort to understand human behavior. And after reading this book, you would be much wiser than before concerning your perception of human nature in today's complex world. And the hope is that more and more people would have access to the views and, wisdoms expressed in this book when they deal with strangers in the world that we live in. This is a book that should be read by anybody who have some, opportunity to talk to strangers, which means everybody. This should be read by everybody.